Well, hello everyone. It's Lynette Lewis, and today I'm just so excited to be bringing you another one of our interviews in our week-long focus on Mother's Day, leading up to Mother's Day, and the various interesting facets that go into this concept of motherhood. Today I've got one of my very, very dear friends. We've been friends for, goodness, years, almost 20 years probably, when you add up all the years since we first met. We met at our church in New York City. My dear friend Alyssa. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Lynette. Thanks for having me.
Alyssa and I, as I said, we go way back. She and her twin sister have a real fondness for twins because I do have twin girls, and she and her twin sister came to our church in the early days of the church starting in New York City. We've been friends ever since and have had so many similarities as career women in New York. We meet for lunch and encourage each other on many different aspects of our careers. But over the last number of years, we've had a lot in common when it comes to motherhood, and really wanted you guys to get the chance to share a little bit of our conversation about our whole interesting journey of motherhood. I'm going to let Alyssa open it up and share a little bit about her journey, but I just know you guys are going to be so encouraged by this woman, this friend of mine who has just deepened in so much wisdom when it comes to motherhood. And so Alyssa, thank you again for joining. You and your husband, Michael, are in our Connect group. We do a lot of life together, and I'm glad we can chat about this today. Where are you, by the way?
Lynette.
Tell us where you are, because we've all been living. She's a New Yorker. We've all been living through this pandemic. Where are we talking to you today?
We are in upstate New York in the Catskills right now, and we are very, very blessed to have a home up here that we go to on weekends and holidays. It's just been really great. We built the home about 3 years ago, and I was telling Lynette before this started that it's just been a huge blessing with the coronavirus and everything that's going on to get away from the city, to come up here where things feel relatively normal because it's all about the outdoors and we don't really see a lot of people up here anyway. So it's just been really great to be here. So he's out tooling the property. I don't know what he's doing. He's outside doing something.
I know, we send him out, don't we? I got Ron out in the yard with the girls going through the sprinkler today. It's so warm here, and they're enjoying a fun little out moment. I said, just steer clear here while I talk to Alyssa. So, well,
it's fun here.
Your home is gorgeous. You are so generous with it. You shared it with our entire church team. And we have been very, very blessed with that beautiful property as well. But talk to us a little bit, dive right in, and let's start our conversation about your journey in particular. I would love for you just to share whatever you feel led to share about it.
Sure. Thanks, Lynette. Well, first of all, I guess I will say that I think that there's probably a lot of people that might be able to identify with my story as I start talking about it. And it may not look exactly the same, but I think that we're all waiting on something. And if I can summarize my journey, it's been long, it's been painful, and I'm still in the waiting process. But I think we can relate. You know, we're all waiting for a relationship or a spouse or a job or, you know, your dream breakthrough moment or a baby or, you know, this whole coronavirus to be over finally. We are all waiting something. And I think God really does amazing things for us as we wait. So my story towards motherhood has been a long time coming. It started about 10 years ago when my husband and I just really wanted to start a family. We've been married now for about 13 years. And I started this process out just fearless. You know, we knew that we might have some challenges early on, and we just started out fearless. And that was one of the key words that my aunt, who's, you know, I'm very close to, and also my mom just said, be fearless. You've always been fearless about moving to New York, about all these things. But 10 years is a really long time to be fearless. So I can't say that I've been fearless the whole time. And there's been a lot of pain and suffering, but I've also decided to be open, and that's one of the insights I've learned, openness, and I can probably share a little bit more about that. So we're open now. We are pursuing adoption. It's something I never, ever thought that I would be open to. First of all, it's not something I thought that I would have to do. And then once I realized that it may be something that would be a next step for us, it's not something that I thought I would be open to. And it really took me a long time to become open to that.
You know,
so that's where we are still waiting and believing, but probably through adoption is how I will become a mom.
Well, you and I've had lots of talks about this whole concept of adoption, and you know, it was never my thing. It's funny too. I don't know if you found this, but once you start entertaining the idea of adoption, I met so many different women who would say to me, "I've always wanted to adopt. You know, I've always thought I'll have a child or two of my own, and then I'll adopt it." And it just is a very popular thing. But for me, I was like you. I mean, I love the concept, of course, but I just never figured that it would be my journey. And I love when you talk about openness, because isn't the walk of faith really wrought with junctures of having to become open, kind of open-minded, yeah, open-hearted, open-handed. Okay, God, I give it to you. You know, this isn't even what I want to be offering you, but here we go. And I've seen you do that over and over. Can you talk about how you get open to something? Because I think openness is often a process. It's not like one day I'm not open, the next day I am. I think it's somewhat of a journey. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think if I had to distill sort of this 10-year-long journey and some of the lessons that I've learned, and some of them have been, none of them have been overnight lessons. They've all been sort of a process of things. The first thing I started to realize, and it's not like it was a light bulb, it happened over many situations and many trials and tribulations, but I started to really understand that feelings, although, you know, feelings can be very good and we're all human and God made us with feelings are not the same as faith, and those things need to be separated even in our own minds a lot of time. And I actually pulled up a list of, this is actually an abbreviated list that I made a long time ago, of a bunch of feelings that I have experienced through this process. I'm going to read them really quickly.
Good.
So again, you know, this has been a 10-year-long journey with turning over every single stone of fertility treatments and, you know, other types of therapy. And, you know, both Michael and I actually have challenges in that area. And so he's done a lot of the same, but of course a lot is on the woman. So through this process, there's been a lot of fear, anxiety, pain, despair at times, feeling forgotten, feeling some hope for sure, feeling like a failure, feeling lost, feeling disbelief. And I do think that disbelief even can be a feeling, feeling exhausted, excluded, and angry. And even though those feelings have all been there at points of time along this journey, I think that you can still find peace and hope in the waiting. You can. I'm telling you, you can, because I have found peace over the last 10 years, even with this list, which actually goes on and on. When I started this list years ago, it goes on and on of different feelings that I felt over the past 10 years. So I think for me, one of the things I started to realize is I need to separate those things in my mind. It's not a terrible thing to sometimes feel those feelings, but I need to separate those feelings from my faith, and my faith is grounded in something so much bigger, so much greater than myself and my own feelings. So that was really the first kind of revelation that I had, and it wasn't something, again, that happened overnight. It happened over years. And the second thing was about being open, and that the fact that openness is a process, and a process is not linear. So I didn't go through this process and say, oh, I'm not open at all. Oh, I'm a little bit open, a little bit more, and finally I'm open. I went through this process of being open to adoption with, I'm not open at all. I'm a little bit open. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. And it just kept bouncing around, but I was going like this. And finally I realized that I could be open to it. And so it's just really a process, and a process is not linear. So that's just been a huge realization for me. And then, you know, I think one thing that we don't talk a lot about, if you're struggling with, again, anything, and especially if it's a long suffering type of thing, like this is for me, and maybe for you, it's, you know, getting your dream job, or, you know, that breakthrough moment. But, a lot of people in your life, you know, and this is true, unfortunately, for Christians and non-Christians, pain is really uncomfortable. Pain is uncomfortable to talk about. Pain is uncomfortable to acknowledge. Pain is just really uncomfortable. And so many people, and myself included, don't really know how to handle other people's pain.
Oh,
So,
so true.
you may expect them to know what to say or what to do, or, how to comfort you a little bit. But most of the time, it's just so uncomfortable that people don't acknowledge it. And that can be okay sometimes. And part of what I want to talk about, maybe if we have a couple minutes at the end, is like how we can give advice to people who may know other people that are in pain and struggling, and how to acknowledge that piece. But if you are the person that's in that moment, it takes work, but try not to get offended every time you feel like somebody didn't acknowledge what you needed.
Wow.
So all of those things, very, very hard lessons. I'm not done learning them by any means, but they are 3 things that I've sort of, over this 10-year-long, decade-long struggle, have come to realize.
I love so many nuggets of gold in what you just shared, and I want to touch on a couple things. First of all, that openness is not linear. I love that. I always tell people who ask me kind of how my journey went, I'll just say, you can't be open to something until you can be open to something. Because right. I think so often, even well-meaning people will say to us, well, have you ever thought of adoption? Or, they try to get you to options so that you'll feel better. But it's just like you said, you might be sort of maybe open to it, but then you really get honest and you're like, but I don't want this, or I don't, and I think that's just that ongoing. I love how you described it. Like, yes, I'm open. Well, I'm not sure if I'm open, or maybe I'm open, but I would be open, it's really complicated. I know my mom has had a lot of health challenges over the years, and I've seen her process it very similarly. The doctor will be giving her a new treatment plan, and she's like, but that's not what I want to do. And maybe I should be open, but I don't know if I should. And then, but what if? And all the unknowns that go with a process, whatever that process is that people are facing right now. And I think too, it's the not knowing. If God was to say to you, Alyssa, here's my plan, and you can trust me, I think in many ways that would be easier, right? Because we trust God. We know that He
said to me years ago, you're going to be a mom through adoption. I would have probably had my moments of all kinds of those emotions and feelings, but I would have said, okay, but that's not how life goes. And you're sort of, it unfolds a lot of times where, what you are left with, and I don't mean in a bad way, but what you are left with is like the realization of like, oh, okay, this is something I need to work towards. And so it really did take me about 2 years to be fully open to adoption. It even took a very painful failed adoption that my husband and I went through last fall to be even more open to it and say, okay, this is not how the story ends for us. So it's been that process and that tension of, is it really the way it's supposed to go, Lord? Are you saying that this is going to be my story, or part of my story, or should I believe for this other thing? So it really took me about 2 years, a full 2 years to become fully open.
Oh, I relate so much to that. As you're describing it too, and the emotions, it reminds me very much of, in many ways, of a process of grieving. I mean, our story in going through actual grief over the loss of our son, Jordan, but then my own fertility journey was very wrought with stages of grief. And I think it's an interesting thing with fertility. And this thought just came to me, and tell me if you think this bears some revelation, but it's almost like, so you're grieving losses as you're going through this fertility thing, losses even in miscarriage, or losses of treatments that don't have the outcomes we think, or loss of time, loss of money. You're grieving all these things. Your time's going, the years that go by and you don't have a child, and life is passing us by in some ways. But then there's this need, if you're going to keep trying and you're going to keep believing, to be stirring up faith. And so it's this odd combination where grief is usually loss in some sense of finality, and you get through it and then you move forward. But in this journey, you have these dual paths requiring faith, and then you're grieving, and it's very complicated at times.
Yes, it's very complicated. One minute you are, I found myself hoping and believing that this treatment was going to be the one. And then come to find out it wasn't. So you grieve for that, but then you have to start the hope process all over again to believe for the next one. And you know, I think for a lot of us, it's not about a baby necessarily. It could be about your dream job. It could be about, you know,
Right.
your next apartment, or your you know, place that you want to move to. I mean, it could be about so many things where, you know, you are finding yourself in the tension of hope and failure, hope and failure. But for fertility, it's very, very, very emotional. And it's that constant cycle of hope and failure and hope again and hope again. But, you know, we serve a big God. And I think one of the things that has helped me keep this hope alive is reminding myself daily who God is, especially in my, who he is in general, but in my life. And one of the things my sister has told me in my darkest moments was that God is who he says he is. He does not lie. And there's so many reminders in scripture of that. And I didn't even write a whole lot of them down, but I know them in my head because I remind myself of that daily. He is who he says he is. He is the great I am. And he doesn't fail. No matter what we may have to go through, he ultimately doesn't fail.
So good. So good, Alyssa. One other question that I think it'd be worth you talking a little bit about is how have you found, because, you know, fertility also is a husband-wife experience oftentimes. I know more and more women are going through having children, not necessarily when they're married, but for you and I, we both have wonderful husbands, and the journey is not a solo journey. And yet I know for me, so much of my journey felt very solo because suffering is really between us and God. I mean, even when Ron and I both were suffering the loss of our child, Jordan, you know, you go through some similar grieving, but it is at the end of the day, it is us and God, us and the Lord that have to plow in deep and process. How has that been in your relationship with Michael? He's so wonderful. How have you navigated some of those interesting dynamics of maybe one person's open to something, then the other one's not ready yet? You know, talk a little bit about the impact on your relationship.
That's a loaded question. I think I am probably one of the most blessed women to have a husband like Michael that I have. I mean, he is so incredible, always putting my needs and our needs before his own. And he really let me lead this process. I think I tend to be a pretty strong personality anyway, but I do know, we live by Christian principles. So I know that side of it too, where oftentimes he has to make certain decisions for our family. But in this, he has let me lead. I knew that he was a lot more open to adoption way before I was open. But he really let me lead the process. And for us, it was about really just communication. You know, with anything that you may struggle with in a relationship, communication is so important. So telling him I'm not ready yet, and he would just say, okay, I understand. But it's also been, for us, one of the other things that we have done, and I think this is another sort of way that we've kept our own hope alive, is we've decided to grow the faith that we have and share that with others by teaching pre-marriage classes. And a lot about marriage is about having a family and having children. And it's actually kind of ironic. One of the very first class we were given to teach was God's purpose for marriage. And wow. Everybody will kind of know that one of the things that God says is having children and passing on God's kingdom by having children. But it's not just about having children. What God said was in Genesis, he said, it's about growing my kingdom, and having children is a very, very good way to do that. That's why he wants us to have children, so that we continue to grow his kingdom. So we thought, wow, well, we can't have children right now, but we're going to grow his kingdom in other ways. And honestly, it's something that we've really enjoyed doing. And, the lesson part of it for me has been, even when I feel like it's the last thing I want to do, like I really don't want to do it. I just almost can't even feel like I'm capable of doing it. If we give a little bit of ourselves it actually, it heals us.
Oh,
And,
so true.
God is able to heal us through that process of just giving a little bit of ourselves to others and getting our focus off ourselves, and giving it to others. And it doesn't have to be in some huge way. I mean, we don't, we can't really, we both have demanding jobs. We don't really have the time to devote hours and hours and hours, but we devote what we can, to other couples in the church. And for us, it's made a huge difference in our marriage, because when we sit down to take someone through a class about marriage, we're working on our own marriage at the same time.
Yes.
So that's been a real blessing for us too.
I love that. I often say, when one dream's on hold, go live another dream. And it's that engaging, choosing to engage, choosing to tell ourselves that, okay, this one area of my life, and this may really help some people that are listening. You know, you may not be waiting like we are for motherhood, but we, as Alyssa said, we're all waiting for something. And if we choose to engage, I think the tendency, the natural thing I know for me so often has been, well, I'm just going to kind of sit back, hold back, and wait till the storm passes. And then when I feel more alive and not so crazy in this suffering season, I'll engage again. But the actual opposite has been true for me as well, just like you so beautifully described. It's like choosing to stay alive and stay engaged in those areas that you can make happen, and trusting that God's going to take care of those things that you can't make happen, or that you are still waiting for. So
Yes.
good.
Yes, I think it's, I think I mentioned a few moments ago, but it's probably going to feel like it's the last thing you want to do sometimes, to think about other people when you're going through grief. It's probably something where you're like, but I can barely do it today. Like I can barely, go to work and put on a happy face today. That is the moment that you should actually engage. That is the moment where you may not be so grief-stricken that you're kind of a basket case. I've been there for sure. But you're just at the point, you're just through that phase, and you're kind of like, I can't think about anything else right now. That's the moment to engage. Just a little bit sometimes. Sometimes it's just reaching out to someone and saying, hey, what do you need from me today? What can I pray for you today? Or I'm thinking of you. Sometimes it's just something as small as that.
Oh, I love it. I love that. It reminds me of something that you and I've laughed about before, but that when I was going through just my long years of trying to get pregnant and all the surgeries and everything that I had, I was Ron's wife, pastor wife at a church. And so every Mother's Day and once or twice other times in the year, we would have baby dedications at church. And so they kind of always wanted us to go up and lay hands on people and pray with their families that were celebrating their new children. And always I would struggle in my seat before I would get up, and I'd be like, here I go again. I'm praying for someone and I don't even have my miracle. And I felt at one point like the Lord was nudging me to just take it a step further. And when I would find other women in the church who were like me, who would share with me, their own struggle with waiting or infertility or whatever they were going through, surgeries, et cetera, maybe they'd lost a child, I just felt like the Lord was saying it for me to pray for them. And so I just started praying for them, and I would lay hands on their tummy and believe with them for pregnancy. Well, sure enough, so many of these women that I was praying for started getting pregnant while I was very much not pregnant. I mean, to the point of 2 or 3 of them got pregnant with twins. And I had been secretly believing for twins. And there were times I'm like, God, are you serious? Like, how crazy? I can help somebody else get their answer, but I can't even get mine. And yet for me, Alyssa, it was like I needed to keep stepping out in the deep water and say what you said just a minute ago, God is so big. And I chose, when that would happen, just in my mind to say, okay, so God's still in the miracle business when it comes to children and pregnancy. And I'm going to grab hold of that truth about my big God. And I'm going to cling to that hope. But it was crazy because, like you said, it was the last thing I felt like doing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. Talk a little bit about, you said you wanted to, well, can you tell us where you guys are at now? So I know you're now open to adoption. You've become very assured that this could be one way that the Lord is going to bring that to you. How has that been for you? Now that you kind of know you want to pursue that, how has it been process-wise for you?
It has not been an easy process. I think anybody who has ever adopted a child can tell you it's a very uncertain process. It's a very decentralized process where, you know, every agency, every lawyer, every state, every country, they all have their different way of going about it. And so you can feel pretty lost. We actually had a very unfortunate experience I alluded to a little bit ago last fall, where we had a beautiful, beautiful baby in our arms for a week, and we took care of her and loved her, and thought we were going to become our parents. And it really fell through at the last minute, the moment that her birth mom, her mom, was going to sign the papers. It fell through completely out of the blue. We had been planning on this particular adoption for, the entire pregnancy. So it was devastating. It was devastating and heartbreaking, and just such a sucker punch, really. I mean, it was so unexpected. And one of the other things that I've kind of learned, or what we try to do to keep hope alive, really, is you can't stay in the same place for too long. I mean, we grieved over that baby girl. We prayed first that there would be a change of heart. And then when that didn't happen, we grieved for months. But you can't stay in the same place for too long. And, you know, I think if you do that, sometimes you get a little paranoid, or paralyzed, I should say, not paranoid. You get a little paranoid. So we've decided to pick ourselves up, keep going, to keep going through with the adoption plans. We've sought other advice. We've gotten a different lawyer, although we're still working with the original one, and just really put more irons in the fire. So we have a website. We have all these things that you do now, because the world has changed so much. But we've gone through the steps to really get ourselves out there. And again, not something that ever wanted to do. My story was very private. Even to talk like this a couple years ago, I would not have been open to it. My story was very, very private. But we've put ourselves out there. We're just believing that somebody will see that website. There'll be something that will connect us with the right birth mom next time. And, you do have to take the steps, practical steps, by creating the website. We're going to have, advertising and things to draw people into it, and, all of that. But that's how it works nowadays. So it's not just about sitting back and hoping and believing, yes, we're doing that, but we're also just really taking practical steps now to move on and to hopefully, get our little miracle. And when I say move on, it's moving on to whatever the next phase of this is. Not moving on from the losses that we've had. We'll never forget those. And the baby girl that we had for a week, we will always pray for her. We believe her life will be better for it. How, we don't know. But I could not stay in that state of grief for so long. I couldn't say this is how it ends, because it's not how it ends. It's not how it ends. I don't know how it ends, but not this way.
That's powerful right there, Alyssa. Just declaring that. And I encourage you, if you're watching today, maybe you know somebody that is going through what we're describing. And maybe we'll finish with this, Alyssa. I'd love for you to just share quickly thoughts on how to encourage those that are waiting. Because you and I both know that it is, as you said at the beginning, it's difficult. A lot of people don't know what to say. But here we are in the week of Mother's Day. And we know a lot of people that are not yet moms, that are in the waiting for motherhood phase. How would you encourage someone who's either watching or knows somebody who's going through this? What works the best? What ministers to you the most when someone says something to you or is in a position to really encourage you?
It's difficult. Every Mother's Day has been difficult over the past 10 years. And I think, like I said, people don't really know what to say. If you know somebody in a situation of waiting, I would just say what works for me, and it may not be for everybody, but what works for me, what really speaks to me, is just the acknowledgement. And it doesn't take a lot. It really just takes, hey, I know this might be a difficult day for you, I'm thinking about you, and that's it. Or, hey, I'm still praying for your miracle. Or that's really all it takes. And I would just say, err on the side of inclusion rather than exclusion. I think we've all been excluded from some things because maybe we don't have a spouse, or maybe we don't have enough money to go on this vacation, or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Or, maybe we're not included in that birthday party or whatever it is. Err on the side of inclusion. Let that person, come or not come. Let that person respond or not respond. But err on the side of inclusion. And sometimes it just takes a little text. Hey, thinking of you. That's all. So, hopefully that speaks to other people. I just know for me, that's what tends to work. But thank you so much, Lynette, for having me. I hope that this story has encouraged you in a funny way, right? Because I don't have my miracle yet, but I can tell you these feelings are real, and they are not something that needs to or has to last the decade of the struggle or however long your struggle is, because God can turn your situation around, and he can work from your inside out, and he can change your heart and give you peace and hope, even in feelings like this, where they're pretty bad feelings at times. But overall, these are temporary feelings, and God is an eternal God.
That is so good. So good. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that Alyssa and I have said back and forth to each other for many, many years is the story's not over yet. I love when you said a minute ago, it doesn't end like this. This isn't the end. And we're saying that to you today. If you're watching or somebody who needs this interview, please send it to them. We will have some links. I always get our speakers to add any links that they think would be helpful. And we'll do that again in the write-up here with the video, so that you can pass it along or share it. And just thank you, Alyssa, for your life, for your story, for your openness, for your friendship. I treasure you with all my heart. You have comforted me in so many moments, because when we find in the eyes of a friend shared tears, it makes me cry right now, because there's nothing like it, to know that you're not alone. And I just feel the people that are watching today, you're not alone. And Mother's Day is complicated for a lot of reasons, but we're going to believe in a big God, and we're going to believe that there's more to our stories, and that someday, that great someday, we'll see him face to face, and we'll see what it all meant in so many more colorful details. So I love you, my friend. Thank you for joining. It was great to talk.
Thank you, Lynette. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to you too.